Hello, hello.
Hello.
Welcome back. So good to be back with you. Welcome to Living Richly with Curo. I'm Ann McCabe, CEO and partner here at Curo, and I'm joined, as always, by the amazing Atrisa.
Aw, you're so kind. Hi, I'm
Yeah.
Atrisa Roberts, COO and partner with Ann at Curo Private Wealth. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes, I'm not kind. I just speak the truth.
Well,
I just
well, I
throw
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yes, I just throw truth bombs. That's what I do. All right. Well, welcome back to another week. Today, the topic that we are going to talk about is something that we love talking with clients about, and that is HSAs, which stands for Health Savings Accounts. So, we are going to do a bit of a deep dive into
Yeah.
what are HSAs, why should you consider them, what are some of the rules to be aware of. But before we get into our topic du jour, let's do a little A-team catch up. So, Atrisa, Miss Golfer and podcaster extraordinaire, what is
Extraordinaire.
extraordinaire? What is new and exciting aside from you drinking your tea with your pinky up, which I'm confident you have been doing?
Of
What
course.
else is new?
Well, I will start with this week has felt a lot more settled for me than last week did. Last week felt just sort of, I felt all over the place. This week, I've actually had some time to think and process, which is always nice, where you're not just jumping from one thing to another. So just wanted to put that out there because I think I was a little chaotic on our last episode. Not much is new. If you've read my bio at all on our website, I am a huge foodie. I love food, and I was sharing with the team that like dining out and trying new restaurants is like a hobby for me. So I got to try a restaurant that has been on my list from the Michelin Guide last weekend in DC. I don't know if I should name it though, because I didn't have the best experience. But I'll just
I
say
think
if
you
you
should.
think
I
I should
think you
share it.
should. I do. It's kind of your way of doing a review. It's the same thing if you're doing a review of a restaurant online. I think, it's
Yeah,
important to share. Doesn't mean that everybody's going to have the same experience,
very
but this was
true.
your experience. And I think you should share the information.
Very true. So my sister and I dined out at Dauphin's, which is a Creole type cuisine restaurant. It's downtown DC near City Center. Beautiful restaurant. It's in a great space. It's been on my list for a while. And unfortunately, I was just slightly over, I no more than slightly. I was pretty underwhelmed. And maybe just because I had built it up in my head a lot about the experience, but I just thought the food was extremely underseasoned, which was just so shocking for Creole cuisine. It's not usually
So
what you
strange.
equate, right, for something to be underseasoned. And we were there on a Saturday night where you expect, restaurant service to be humming, and the service just lagged and was very slow. We had to ask for things multiple times. So if I'm doing it on a scale of 5 stars, if I'm rating it like a true reviewer, then I probably honestly would give the experience, if I'm kind, a 3 out of 5. The
Okay.
cocktails were great, so I would probably go again just for maybe a happy hour to sit at the bar because I thought the bar was beautiful. So I would be open to just going maybe happy hour, having drinks and maybe, some snacks with friends. But I don't know if I need to rush back for a full dining experience again. So, but that's
Yeah.
the latest in Atrisa's Michelin guide to restaurant dining in DC.
So, you know how there is a curse with the Morningstar stars? So, when a
Mm-hmm.
mutual fund earns like a 4 or 5 star, usually the next year and subsequent years, they tend to underperform because it's like
Yes,
the Morningstar curse. I wonder if restaurants have a similar thing with the Michelin rating. I don't
maybe.
know. I'm just throwing it out there, but I wonder if there's like a level of overconfidence or like we don't really need to be careful about the service. I don't know. You would think that with that sort of expectation would come very high levels of service and like having their stuff
Right.
together. But I just wonder.
Maybe there might be something. Now, I've been to some Michelin stars where I fully, from the time I stepped in the door, I understood why they earned them and why they deserve them and why the check was so hefty at the end of the night. But I think there might be something to it as well. Maybe there's just a little bit of an arrogance maybe that comes with the distinction. But yeah, I definitely felt less than attended to and cared for at the restaurant, which was unfortunate because again, it's a beautiful restaurant. It had a great energy and vibe. And I'm all about the energy and vibe at a restaurant too. It's a full
Yeah.
experience, right? You should walk in and you should feel that whole thing. But yeah, it was a little bit of a letdown, but that's the most recent update in my life. So enough about my droning on. What's new with you?
My update is I had such a fun weekend. I went to a girlfriend's house for a birthday party, a house party, and she had
Right.
a
Love
DJ,
that.
and it was 80s themed. So we all got dolled up and 80s themed out. Thankful for Amazon, because I didn't have any of those clothes in my closet. But it was just such a blast, and this friend of mine was diagnosed with breast cancer, I wanna
Oh.
say close to 20 years ago, it's been a while,
Mm-hmm.
and she was given 5 years to live, and so every day she is one of these people who lives as if it's the last day of her life. She is all about having a blast and being joyful and giving back and trying to help people, and it was just everybody that was at the party was just, to your point, great vibes, great energy. DJ was amazing. I literally could not pull myself off the dance floor.
Right.
I haven't danced for that many hours in a long time. And it was just a blast. The people, the music, the celebration, it was amazing. So that
That's
was my,
fantastic.
for sure, highlight. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. I always feel like those kind of events are just so cathartic in a way because, so much of our life we're so buttoned up and serious and managing all of the things. And when you have those moments when you can just dance your heart out and just have fun with good friends, it can be such a cathartic experience and a good reset. I'm really glad you got
Yeah.
that. And to share it with a person who wants that, energy and is living life to the fullest. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's fun to meet new people who you just hit it off with almost immediately because you know if
Yeah.
you're in that group and you're friends with the same person, you're going to probably have the same kind of energy. And so the
Right.
people that I met, new friends were just fantastic. So it was a lot of fun.
Good. Oh, I'm happy. I love
Yeah,
that for you.
so much. I loved it from too. I woke up the next morning and I was like, that was probably one of the most fun nights I've had in a long time.
Nice.
Super
You
fun.
deserve it.
So, thank you. I appreciate that. I actually got some feedback on my 80s outfit from my 12-year-old. It was pretty funny. He was like
Because
helping me
he
pick out my
knows.
shoes because he knows he was definitely so in tune with 80s style and fashion for sure.
Right.
So, without further ado, we promised we would talk about
Mm.
HSAs or health savings accounts today. Teresa and I are big nerds about these things, so we get excited, but HSAs, as we'll go into in a moment, are so exciting. They're, I think, one of the only triple tax-free investment vehicle that exists. Usually when you're talking about an investment, you're paying taxes on the way in or the way
All the way
out.
out.
But
Right.
as we'll talk about in a moment, yeah, we with the HSA, we're not paying taxes on any of it, assuming we're following a certain amount of rules. So we wanted to kick off with some dire statistics, I'm going to say, around how much all of us are spending on healthcare. So, the most recent data we have is from 2021, and the average person in the United States in 2021 spent over $12,000 on healthcare expenses. That is an exorbitant amount of money. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of us came out of pocket
Right.
$12,000, but that was the average healthcare spend per American in 2021. And if you look at the amount of money we're all going to have saved by the age of 65 to carry us through to age 95 and pay for our healthcare expenses, it's estimated that we need, after tax, about $116,000 per person just to cover healthcare expenses in retirement. If you are in a partnership, multiply that by two because that is per
Right.
person. So we are talking about huge numbers. So, one of the ways that we can save for and plan for increased healthcare expenses is through something like a health savings account or an HSA. So, Teresa, you want to share with everyone what the heck is an HSA if you're not as familiar with the tool?
Sure. Well, one will start. It's an option that is available to people who are enrolled in high deductible health plans. So you do have to be in a specific type of health plan to be eligible for HSA contributions. But if you are, it can be really powerful because, like Ann mentioned, it's a tax advantage saving account. So you would almost want to think of it like an IRA, but specifically for healthcare expenses. So, in the same way, you're able to make deductible contributions to this savings account. So that means you're getting the tax savings on the way in, like Ann mentioned, the assets inside of the account, which now many plans offer the options to invest them and not just hold them as cash. They continue to grow as long as they're there, tax deferred, so you don't pay taxes while it's invested in the HSA. And then, if used for qualified health or Medicare expenses, medical expenses, you pull the money out tax free. So that's what we mean when we say it's a triple tax advantage type account and can be extremely powerful in saving up to meet that huge number and just shared of what is estimated is required to cover healthcare costs during retirement.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And like Teresa mentioned, you do have to be in a high deductible plan. And something that's really important for those folks who are already in retirement or Medicare age for you to be aware of is if you're covered by another non high deductible plan like Medicare, you are disqualified. So be really
Right.
careful if you're already on Medicare that you may not fund an HSA even if you're on another high deductible plan. So let's talk about some numbers. These numbers and the contribution limits, just like for 401ks and IRAs, change on an annual basis. In 2024, individuals can contribute up to $4,150 to an HSA, and families, so assuming you have you and a spouse or you and children, can contribute up to $8,300 into your HSA. Now, the catch up contribution, this is important to distinguish, starts at age 55. So, unlike for retirement plans like IRAs and 401ks, where the catch up starts at age 50, be careful to note that the HSA catch up does not start until age 55, but you can contribute an additional $1,000 to your HSA. One other thing that we want to bring to your attention is those maximum amounts include any employer contribution that your company may make. So, again, to distinguish between a 401k where you've got your employee maximum, and then on top of that, your company can match. With the HSA, it is a total bucket. So, if you are an individual and your company is funding, let's say, $1,000 to your HSA per year, you would have to back out that $1,000 and your maximum out of pocket into your HSA could be $3,150. So there are some similarities to the HSA, as Teresa mentioned, but there are some also distinct differences that you want to be aware of prior to going into this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to pay attention because some plans, the employer is making a match to your contribution. But like Ann just hinted at, there are lots of employers now, especially with younger textile companies, where they're just making a contribution to an HSA for you, whether you're making your own deferred contributions anyway. So just pay attention to that because you might actually be receiving HSA contributions even if you have not set up to make your own contributions as well, which can also be really helpful in building up to that limit every year.
Right, exactly. But if you are interested in saving money in taxes, and I've yet to meet someone who is not interested in saving money in
Oh no,
taxes,
I just love writing the
and
IRS a check.
I know. I mean, we're all about paying our fair share, but not more than that, right? So
Right.
if you are interested in limiting your tax liability, this can be a great tool to reduce your taxable income today and also your taxable income in the future, as well as have a dedicated account for healthcare expenses. One of the other things, if you're familiar with an FSA, a flexible spending account, those are what we call use it or lose it. So if you've been in an FSA, you've probably gotten to the end of the year and you're stocking up on Tylenol and
Right.
Advil because you have money left in your FSA that you have to spend. With the HSA, you don't have that use it or lose it. So you get to keep funds in the HSA. As Teresa mentioned, that money can be invested and you let it roll until and unless you need it in the future. So there is not that issue of use it or lose it, which is really powerful.
Yep, and they're portable. So if you change jobs, it comes with you. Many of the plan sponsors now even issue you a debit card so that you can make expenses or pay for expenses in the store with the HSA funds as well.
Yeah. So, Teresa, do you want to go over some examples of what you can use your HSA funds for? Let's say you wanted to use them today for healthcare expenses.
Yeah, of course. So I think what's nice is that there are lots of ways now that you can use it. Some of them we probably shouldn't share with a few of our clients,
Yeah.
but of course, standard medical expenses. Of course, you can use your HSA for, and those would be the ones where you think of, you go to pay for a prescription, right? That is something that we just consider sort of one of our standard medical expenses. But you can also use them even for daily vitamin supplements that you use. So if you're in retirement and you're paying for medical expenses out of pocket, you can even order your daily vitamins. You probably have noticed on Amazon now that some products come up labeled as HSA eligible. So there's so many different ways to use it. You can also use it to cover Medicare premiums. Now, of course, this is only if you are not claiming your Social Security benefit. If you have started to draw your Social Security benefit, your Medicare premiums are automatically deducted from that benefit. But if you have not started Social Security and you are paying for Medicare out of pocket, you can use your HSA toward those premiums. You can also use it towards long term care premiums. And now there are some caveats, which I think Anne can get into a little bit about if your standard life insurance policy has a long-term care rider, but if you have just a traditional long-term care policy, the HSA funds can be used toward those premiums as well.
Yeah, exactly. If you do have one of those whole life or permanent insurance
Mhm.
policies with a long-term care rider, that's where it gets a little bit more gray unless your insurance company distinguishes the cost of insurance from the cost of long-term care. In those instances, you may be able to use the HSA to pay for strictly the long-term care benefit, but that's when you definitely want to bring in a professional to have them take a look at it because you definitely want to be careful if the IRS ever comes back to audit you. One of our
Right.
biggest pieces of advice with HSA is to keep really good records and to be able to prove if the IRS comes knocking that you have been using the HSA for eligible qualified distributions and expenses. So be really careful about that. One of the things we wanted to do, in addition to talking about the basics of HSAs, is to share with you some unique features of HSAs and things that you may not be aware of when you're doing kind of high level research on HSAs. So the first is you can, and we would encourage you to have the majority of the money invested in
Yes.
your HSA. Now, most of the time, what I have seen is the HSA managers require for you to keep a certain amount in cash. I've seen anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 in cash, and they want you to have that cash in case you do need to use the HSA for short-term medical expenses, so you don't have to liquidate investments. But anything above that amount, you are able to invest, and we would encourage that because if this is a long-term investment account for retirement, for example, for healthcare expenses in the future, we want to make sure we're maximizing those
Right.
returns and having that account grow as much as we possibly can. Because remember, it's tax free as long as you take the money out for eligible expenses. So super, super powerful. One of the things that I was able to do in my HSA as well is set up an automatic investment. So anytime money hits my HSA, assuming I have that minimum, I think our plan is $2,000 of cash, if I remember
Hmm.
correctly. As soon as it hits that amount, anything above it will automatically invest. So just like we love automatic investments with 401ks or even with a non retirement account, do the same thing in your HSA where you don't have to go in and log in and manually invest that money. Just set up an auto investment would be a really good rule of thumb there.
Yeah, no, fantastic advice for those. And again, the power of tax deferred growth and savings and investments. We've seen it in IRAs, we've seen it in 401ks. That compounding creates such a difference 5, 10, 15 years down the road. So don't neglect it in powerful tools like HSAs as well.
Yeah. Next, unique thing you may not be aware of with an HSA is after age 65, you can actually use the funds inside of an HSA for non medical or non healthcare expenses without a penalty. You will pay ordinary income tax. So, if you do take a non qualified distribution from an HSA when you're over the age of 65, there will be taxes on that
Right.
money, but you will not have a penalty. And the penalty for taking non qualified distributions from an HSA prior to age 65 is actually steeper than in an IRA or 401k. It's 20% versus 10% on those retirement accounts. But just additional amounts of flexibility that we get once we do attain age 65. And then the other thing that a lot of people are not aware of that I think is so unique and really powerful is you can reimburse yourself for medical expenses from your HSA years in advance, assuming those expenses were incurred after your HSA was open. So let's say you open your HSA this year, you fund it, but you don't take any distributions. And let's say you've got $1,000 worth of medical expenses out of pocket this year, and you just decide, I'm going to leave the money in the HSA. We'll talk about this strategy in a moment. But then 5 years down the road, you lose your job, you're tight on cash. You can take $1,000 distribution from your HSA for medical expenses that you incurred this year in 2024, and that is a qualified distribution. Now, we're going to reinforce the record keeping.
The record
So
keeping.
important. Yes. We would encourage you to, if you're an electronic file person, have an electronic file specifically for your HSA and medical expenses. If you're a paper file person, have a paper file specifically for HSA. Super, super important because, again, if the IRS comes and audits you, you want to be able to prove these were expenses that were medical qualified and you didn't get them reimbursed. If you get reimbursed from health insurance or you write those expenses off on your tax return, those are not eligible to be reimbursed in the future. But if those things are not true and you did not get reimbursed, you may do so years in the future. So I think this is something that a lot of people are not aware of and so powerful in case you need funds in the future.
Right. Yeah, and just a note on the record keeping, because again, we're going to reinforce that idea. There are lots of things, HSA or qualified medical expenses, even things you spend for qualified education expenses that we report on an honor system from a tax perspective. And it really only has to be proven in the case where you're audited. And lots of people will say, oh, what's the chances I get audited? You say that until it happens. So remember, hang on to the receipts. Create, like Ann mentioned, a folder on your desktop. If you order things online, create a file in a file cabinet, tuck the receipts away. So in the unlikely case that it does happen, you'll be ready and there'll be no question. Just want to double down on the record keeping for these types of expenses.
Super important. So let's talk about some ways that strategies, I'm going to call them, that you can use the HSA. And I'm going to start with one of the ones that is one of our favorite strategies, especially for our clients who have great cash flow. They're
Mm.
still working and they really don't need the money from the HSA to pay for medical expenses today. If you find yourself in that situation, you've got great cash flow, great income, we would encourage you, assuming you have a high deductible plan and you qualify, to maximum fund the HSA, invest as much as you possibly can, and let it ride. Do not reimburse yourself for medical expenses today. Pay for those out of pocket. You've got the cash flow, you've got the income, and let that account grow and compound into the future. So that's what we would recommend for our clients in that situation. Teresa, why don't you talk about clients that are maybe not in that situation and maybe want to use HSA funds today?
Yeah, I think that if you are wanting to use the HSA funds. Of course, that's what it's been put there for, right? So if you don't have the money to pay for those costs out of pocket, then you definitely want to make sure you're taking advantage of the money that you have saved in your HSA account toward those qualified expenses. But in the same point, and like many things, I think there can be a balance of the strategy, right? So, as Anne mentioned, there's always that opportunity to reimburse yourself should cash flow get tighter. So make a judgment call when it's time to pay the expense. Can I afford to do this right now out of just my everyday expense cash flow? If you can, pay for it out of the cash flow. Situations may get tighter later where the cash flow is a bit more strained. You always have the opportunity to go back and reimburse yourself later in that situation. So, like most things we talk about from a strategy perspective, sometimes there's a middle ground and there's a balance of how you handle it. But remember, that's what it's there for. So, if you can't afford to cover the expenses out of your cash flow, then you definitely want to take advantage of the HSA first, since you will be able to pull that money out tax free, as opposed to, let's say, charging it on a credit card or pulling it out of some other qualified plan.
Right. Exactly. And then if you are currently retired, you obviously have medical expenses. We all do. So, and if you have money in an HSA, we would definitely encourage you to use it. HSAs are not great accounts to leave to beneficiaries, especially non spousal beneficiaries. The tax impact is pretty aggressive with non spousal beneficiaries. So, if you are currently retired, you've got money in your HSA, I would bet that you have medical expenses. Go ahead and use
Right.
it. That's what it's
And
there
use
for.
it.
That's
Absolutely.
what you save those funds for. Yeah. All right. So I think that was a pretty good deep dive into HSAs. I think it's safe to say that we are big fans of HSAs. Anytime you can get the triple tax-free benefit, get that money invested, and have a separate account specifically for healthcare expenses, which we all know are huge and only getting higher, we
Right.
would definitely say, assuming a high deductible plan makes sense for you, and you don't have tons of medical expenses currently or tons of medical issues currently, we would definitely encourage you to consider funding an HSA.
Yeah, of course. And then just one other note, because we talk about tax deductibility. It for HSA contributions, those are what CPAs would call above the line deductions. So you don't have to itemize deductions every year to get the advantage of it. Even if you're just taking the standard deduction, which is going up incredibly every year, you still get the advantage of deducting any contribution to an HSA. So just a little note about that tax advantage as well.
Yes, very important. All right. So, time for our closing thought. And my closing thought today is I was getting my nails done over the weekend, and I go to a really small, very quiet place to get my nails done. And one of the nail techs there, who I don't go to, but she was talking, she was diagnosed with, I don't know what kind of cancer, but she is in chemo
Hmm.
currently. So, she was diagnosed with cancer. And I was asking her how she was doing. She had a, she's lost her hair from the chemo, and she had a beautiful scarf on her head, and just checking in with her. And
Hmm.
she said that this diagnosis has actually been a blessing to her. She was a smoker. She has
Mm.
since stopped smoking. The day she got diagnosed, she stopped smoking, which was great.
Yeah.
And she said, I think this was a wake up call. And I'm actually grateful that this
Wow.
diagnosis enabled me to change my habits and change some things. And I think this was a wake up call. And had I not listened to it, it would have been even worse in the future. And so, aside from just the amazing amounts of courage and positive energy it takes to respond to a situation like that, my takeaway was we can't oftentimes control what happens in our lives, but we 100% of the time can control our response, our reaction, how we talk about it in our minds to ourselves and to others. And it was just super inspiring because here's this woman literally in the middle of chemo. She's working,
Right.
first of all. And second of all, is looking at this as a blessing and finding the silver lining. So that's my closing thought for today is remember we can't always control. Oftentimes we can't control what happens in our lives, but we can control how we respond. And I think framing something as why is this happening for me as opposed to why is this happening to me makes all the difference in how
Yeah.
we digest something that's going on in our lives.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. And I'm from a religious and spiritual family and consider myself a spiritual person. But my grandmother would always say when we were growing up that God sometimes has a way of getting your attention in things in life, and whether you're religious or spiritual or not. I think there are always moments that happen in our lives where you realize this is a moment to grab my attention, right? To make me pay attention, to make me hone in, to take better care of myself, to make better decisions. So I think that's an extremely powerful way to consider whether it's happening to me or whether this is happening for me, right? For my benefit.
Yeah. And I've found that God, the universe, whatever, however you want to call that, continues to send the message louder and
Hmm.
louder until we start listening and picking up, right? Like maybe it's a small thing at first and then we ignore it, we're too busy, and then it becomes a bigger and bigger and bigger thing. But that message will continue to come to us until we pay attention.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my closing thought, while not the same, is I think in the same vein, but it's really just about taking care of yourself. I have been refocusing a lot on my health and fitness journey, getting back into my pretty standard routine with Orange Theory, and the weather's gotten nice. So I've gotten back to some outdoor running and just the improvement just in my own attitude, my energy level is so drastically impacted by how well I'm caring for myself physically, eating better, less deep fried, less alcohol, less sugar. It improves the way I sleep. It improves my attitude throughout the day. I just feel so much more energy. And now that I'm really refocusing that in my life and taking better physical care of myself, I just noticed just how much better I feel. So that's just been my thought is, into that same way, take care of yourself and do what you need to do to make sure that, you can live as long and as healthy as you can. I actually had a conversation with a client yesterday who recently lost a grandparent, and she shared that he was 93, and his last day, he got up, he went for a walk, he had dinner with a friend, and then he went to bed and he passed away. And to
Wow.
live sort of that active and healthy where you're still like, oh, I'm going to go out and have dinner with a friend at 93 just speaks to, I think, how we can. And again, we can't determine when and how things happen to us. Lots of that are out of our control. But the things that we can control that help to improve our quality and extend our length of life, I think are so vitally important. So let's take good care of ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that very important reminder, especially for us folks who are busy and always have
Yes,
other things to do and always have people that need us. If we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't really show up well and the best of
right.
our ability for the other people in our lives. Thank you for that reminder. Sometimes when we're giving advice or guidance to people, it's also equally as important for us to listen to it ourselves. Always a good thing to hear. So that wraps us, I think, for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. We want to hear from you. If you enjoyed this episode, you got value out of it, please subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to us. And if you enjoyed the show, give us a 5-star. That goes a long way. We are a brand new podcast, so that goes a long way into making people aware of the information that we're putting out there.
Yeah, and if you have questions just around HSAs or any other thing, questions that might be coming up in your financial life, again, we're podcasters, but our day job, we are also advisors. So please feel
Yes.
free to reach out. You can find us on our website. We're Curo Private Wealth. .com, and you can always reach out that way and submit some questions. If something we can help give you some guidance on, we're happy to do that.
We would love to hear from you.
Yeah.
So thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, have an awesome weekend, and we will
Yeah,
catch you here again next week.
sounds good. Take care.